If you were ever in the process of building a unit and you had a question like, is this fast enough? Do I need more ER? Or is this build okay? Don't worry, you're not alone. Questions like that are asked by many community members on stream or in the Discord for me every day. And honestly, there's no one right answer for those questions. The answer respectively are if it fits your speed tuning, if your playstyle calls for it, and if that's your best gear at that priority. Then the answer is all yes, because at the end of the day, building an RTA ready account will be different for everyone who has different gears, different units, and different ways they like to play. And no matter what a streamer or YouTuber thinks of your build, at the end of the day, you're going to be the one that has to play on that account. So instead of just answering that question, today's video will teach you how to build and view your account. You know, some feed a man a fish, he's good for one meal, but teach a man how to fish and he'll be good for a lifetime. Instead of just answering one question, I'm hoping this video gives you just that and gives you an idea on how to use the resources available to you and build the most competitive RTA account. Well, welcome back to another long-form RTA PvP something video, guys. I'm Valky, and today's video will go over my process and the mistakes you want to avoid, as well as example of building a viewer's account live on stream for building an account. The idea of this video came after the 6th anniversary, where a lot of returning players were commissioning me for services for their account. Out of all the things, the #1 request I got from people was to rebuild their account in Fribbles Optimizer, and when I did it, a lot of students were really surprised at the steps I took and how easy I made it look and how well optimized everything was. So today I want to share with you guys that exact process. Before we charge headfirst into this, we have to consider our 3 main goals. What are the best units on this account? Since the metagame is always changing, new units are being released and buffs are coming back into the game. Being competitive means we have to use the best units to their absolute peak. How do we find good synergies, and do we have units to cover our counter picks? In essence, we want to have a team in mind before we even start. Number 2, how do we get our best gear on those units? If you come from other gacha games like Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, all the examples I can remember right now, you might be used to farming like 5 or 6 pieces of gear for a single unit, and then you glue those gear onto those units and they're there for life. In Epic 7, because of its ever-changing competitive landscape, units will get buffed, new units will get released, gear will be moving a lot. So don't think of it as putting gears on units, but think about it like putting units into gear sets. For example, your fastest set of gear should always be going to your best openers, or your tankiest set should always be going to your best tank or your best reviver in the game. And I think most importantly, point number 3, is it fun? This one's definitely going to vary from person to person. I mean, it's a video game, you should have fun. Many people just want the most competitive accounts because they like winning, and I think that's really easy to do. Just build whatever the account is strongest for, duh. If one of my students wants to play Cleave and he wants to play fast, I'm not gonna force a turtle playstyle on them and make them play villagers with Harseti just because their gear aren't the fastest. You know, instead of them getting bored after 10 matches and finishing the season in Masters, I'd rather them play a slower Cleave account with many options so they can at least get a champion rank and figure out if they want to push for Emperor. Building something you want to play is the key to having successful climb, because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and playing something fun keeps you interested. So with that in mind, let's hop into it. Before I start gearing units, the first thing I do is I gotta figure out a priority for my units. If you've never seen this program, this is Fribbles Optimizer. It's basically an account and gear manager made by a pillar of the community, Fribbles, who's not only got our backs in E7, but in Honkai Star Rail as well. I'll be linking this program in the description. Anyway, a hero priority is a list where the higher up units will take gear from the lower units, but not the other way around. And that's important because that ensures our good unit will have our best gear. I consider building this prio the first step to optimizing any account. If you're confused on exactly how this is done, let me show you the tool I use to do that. Now, if you get to this part of the video and you're like, well, that sure sounds like a lot of work for a video game. Yeah, it is. This is honestly how any competitive works, be it Pokemon where you have to get the EVs perfect, or if you played competitive StarCraft, it's about getting the perfect Colossus or Void Ray timing. And honestly, any competitive game is just about optimizing each and every pixel of resource you got to the max so that you can one-up your opponents. If you are doing better than your opponents, generally speaking, by comparison, you should win. It's the reason why most people I know do this, like, I don't know, rebuild their account only once every season or once every 2 seasons, and sometimes once a year. If you like to skip any of these steps because that step just sounds like too much work for you, understandable. Chapters will be down below. Now, if you've seen any RTA tier lists, this should look very familiar. This is Cecilia Bot's tier list maker, and I use this to build that prio you saw earlier. This is an actual list that I have built for a student, and this step is where we cover our other bases. Building them something fun that they actually enjoy, they'd want to play, and they actually can play, but it also at the same time make sure their best unit get their best gear. In their case, they mainly wanted to play standard with a bit of a lean into speed. I would say they got 2 good sets of fast gear, and then the speed falls off a little bit after that. Their damage gear is pretty good. Support and tank gear lacks a bit to be desired. Oh yeah, their bruiser gear is insane, which makes me think they can play about 2 to 3 openers, mostly standard with a lot of bruisers, and we can fit in some cleave units that'll work with the 2 to 3 openers we build after their bruisers are done. So up top, this is where I put their pre-bans. Harsetti is a no-brainer since they like to play speed and want to flex a bit more into speed, but they'd also have to choose between banning New Moon Luna and Empyrean Ilanov. I think both are good choices, but since they've expressed they want to learn how to play a bit more aggressively, I think we're gonna need to use a lot of defense penetration units, and getting them starting on Ilanov with the option to swap Luna into that pre-ban if they ever get stuck is the right way to go. Now, if you're playing faster, you'd have to ban Harsetti and Zio. If you're playing slower, Sea Phantom Politas, Luna, Afternoon Soak Flan, and even Big Daddy himself, Death Dealer Ray, are all good options depending on what you like to play, since those matchups are way more open-ended the moment you're not touching speed. Now, the first pick tier is pretty obvious. This is going to be a mishmash of the most broken units in the metagame right now on the account, and we can afford to gear them. This will always be changing, but right now, I do think Sea Phantom Politas, Ambitious Tywin, and Death Dealer Ray will be in the consideration for any account just because of how strong they are. To me, those are the 3 best units in the game right now, next to Afternoon Soak Flan. Laia can fit in any team and brings insane utility, and Bright Senya is a great anchor for aggressive action since she punishes return damage with her Oath of Punishment. In short, if you just ported over, let's say, the top row of any tier list, for example, this is it. You know, obviously, barring out your pre-bans, this is what you do here. Picks 2 and 3 will mostly be units that are there to synergize with your first pick units. Like, for example, if you plan on playing a lot of Sea Phantom Politas instead of banning her, then your 2 to 3 rotations will never be without Genua and Ambitious Tywin, since they just work together too well. The other thing you need, especially with the 3rd pick ban protection, is units that can hard counter some of the most dominant strategies where you haven't pre-banned them. For example, if you let Death Dealer Ray out of pre-bans, you need to have Dragon King Sharoon and Sylvan Sage Vivians in order to counter him, and Ambitious Tywin, I guess. Solitaria is there to counter Autumn Flan, and Elena is there to counter strategies like Ran and Peyra, this AoE cleave strategy. Most of these units are super good at countering one single strategy, and it's very beneficial to pick them up on that 3rd pick ban protection, and you most of the time want them to have some pretty premium gear, especially if you need them to beat cleave. You need them to beat Death Dealer Ray. These units need to be on good gear. After that, you got your picks 4 and 5, and that's where you want to put your niche counters. You know, those units you want to bring on picks 4 and 5. That's a little bit self-explanatory. They each got their own jobs, but anytime they get picked too early, they get punished. So the spot they belong in are the ones later in the draft, especially on your last rotation on your picks. For example, this is where you want to pick a unit like Arya to counter not only fire units, but also single target drafts, like with Gala Lilius, even though she she has an elemental disadvantage, it's a very good matchup for her. But when you pick her up too early, you are probably pulling a super fast Solitaria and more counter pick in one rotation, and then suddenly that unit is stuck. All of the other units here kind of have a caveat that's like that, where they're really good versus 1, 2, or maybe even 3 strategies, but they can be hard counter pretty easily themselves. After that are the units you just straight up, you want to play them, you like them, and the units you want to try or you have fun with. Arya is a tier up from here and can beat multiple categories of units, and most of the units I have here are just stuff this particular student wanted to play, or they wanted to try out, or they have one good matchup, but it didn't really fit in their playstyle, so they just wanted to kind of try them out and have them on whatever gear. So you kind of get a picture of who gets to go here. And of course, lastly, on the bottom, there's speed imprints. I would say in a more aggressive player, I would have put this higher, since these are really important to winning aggressive and speed mirror matches, but since this particular student wanted to try out some of the faster strategies available to them, I wanted to make sure it's low, it's less committed on gear, and these units are just playable while their account is at a lower rank. So if they just tried them out and they're happy with what they felt, then they can move these units up to right underneath second and third pick. But for now, I think at the bottom is fine, and it's kind of their choice to build as many as they feel like playing and just try them out when they get into races. So let's say you go through your account like this and you get all of your units prioritized and you get your progression chart. Now what? Well, this is where I would load up Fribbles and start building the priority units one at a time and just start building the account. For me, I actually find this quite enjoyable. I like going into Fribbles and looking at numbers, you know. I understand that's not the case for everybody, and if you're a bit more casual or you don't have the time to do this, then instead I would say you can just hop in a game and start building units by hand one at a time. And for most of you guys, I feel like this is a way more reasonable starting point in terms of both the work required and time commitment needed in order to put your account together for PvP. But if you're already a pretty hefty, pretty serious, a really sweaty RTA player, and you're more so looking to take your game to the next level for a potential Emperor or Legend push, well, use this progression chart and build up your Fribbles prios one by one. And by the time you finish, it should look something like this. I would say to get started in RTA, you want at least 16 plus units. That's a starter RTA account. If you have 16 units, I think you can play. If you have less than that, you know, probably playable, but you're gonna lose some game for free sometimes because you just run out of appropriate units for the right situations. If you can double that and go to 32 units, that is a solid account with good options. Definitely going to be like where your best gear is at, and if you could get all of them onto very comfortable builds for yourself, you will have a really comfortable time climbing. Although you might lose 1 out of every 100 games because you don't have like Arya built for a fire unit matchup, right? Once you hit like the mid 50s mark, I would say 56 units, that's where I see most premium accounts with their units, and that's like the units there are good, they make impact, and these are going to be most of the units you pick during a season. Now, can you do more than that? Absolutely. My own account has 100 plus units, but I think that's overkill. You do not need that. And if you gear up that many units, and honestly, I think more likely than not, you are going to get dizzy when you are drafting in RTA. On record, guys, my account has 130 plus units built in Fribbles just for PvP. And that's because not only do I do content, right? I make videos, but sometimes I'll also play mock lobbies with friends or with community members for memes, and you know, we'll do like special rules. So it's definitely not necessary, you know. I think most people takes 50 units and it's more than enough for an entire season. And honestly, that's all you need to run it down the game and start playing your matches. What I would even do is as you're playing, you can keep Fribbles open on the side so that if you run into a scenario where a unit barely gets killed by some damage and you want to make them tankier, then just immediately turn over to Fribbles and then start seeing how you can adjust your units and make them tankier. Or if you miss a kill by just a smidge, then you want to bump up their damage, maybe even lower the speed a little bit so they can hit a little bit harder. That way you can start changing your builds live and use it as a way to fine tune your units. Can't confirm this is something a small amount of Legend players do, not all of them, but some of them, when I watch them stream their matches, they keep their optimizer up on the side, and when a unit doesn't perform as expected, they're just changing their build, or they're seeing what possible builds they can pull out. Now, I would go into exactly how every single unit here is built, but I actually think that takes a bit too much time, and this video is already running pretty long, so I'll tell you guys what. I'll have a separate video after this one where on stream, I'll do a raffle, I'll pull a random stream viewer, and we'll build their account live on stream, just like this, showing every single step of the process. So if you want to see that one, make sure to check out the stream and subscribe and ding the bell to get notified when that video drops. But for now, this video will explain the progression chart and why I find it helpful and what you can do with it when you make one for your account. Because for me, not only does it help you organize your build priority, it organizes your draft, so you can even have this up on your second monitor while you're playing your matches. When you start to run out of gear during your build, it tells you exactly what gear you need to farm, and it really just gives you a lot of insight on how to construct your account as a whole. Lastly, I want to give a shout out to my friend Derp the Jag, who was the first person I've seen use Tier List Maker to make something like this. I've always done this in my head and just kept my priorities intuitively in my head. At some point, he just pointed it out. He's like, hey, you know, you can just lay it out on a Tier List Maker and just do it in order. I was like, wait, you're right. And after that, I've kind of done this for all my students, and so far the feedback has been super positive. It's been really helpful for them, both in terms of building and playing. And I figure, hey, might as well teach it to you guys watching this video at large, and I hope it's helpful to you, honestly. If you find it helpful, you can always help me back by giving the video a like. Comment section and the Discord server is open to you guys for questions and discussions, and I'll see you guys in part 2 of this video. See ya.